Hello and welcome to part 2 in a series of videos that I'm putting out this week where I break down all the fights taking place this weekend at UFC on ESPN 3 from a betting perspective. Now I've already covered 3 fights on this card which you can find in part 1 of this series of videos. I will leave a link for that video in the description below. And in part 1 I did recommend a bet on Glover Teixeira, but things have developed quite a bit since then. If we take a look at the odds, when I first recommended a bet on Glover to the members of my website way back on Monday, which was 3 days ago, Glover was around about a 2.50 underdog, which is a plus 150 underdog if you are in America. And since then, Glover's odds have been absolutely steamed. He was a medium-sized underdog. He is now the favourite, absolutely steamed here. We can see on Monday, actually this isn't showing the best odds you could have got available. Glover was actually around about 2.50 on Sunday and Monday, but this is showing slightly less. But since then you can see the chart here which shows how the line has moved, and Glover's odds have been absolutely steamed. Like I said in that video, guys, that I put out, part 1 of this video, like I said to my members on Monday when I shared the bet with them before I put this video out, there's just tremendous value on Glover. Win or lose, he should never have been an underdog to Ion Cutelaba. If you go back and watch part 1 of this video, I'll explain the reasons why in depth. But the way these odds have moved are a clear illustration that when I put this information out on Tuesday in the video, and when I shared that bet with my members on Monday, there was just tremendous value on Glover. So I hope you got in on him at decent odds. Let's take a look at the current odds and see if he's worth a bet at the current odds. So I personally capped Glover at between having a 60 to 70% chance of winning this fight, probably somewhere in the middle, around about 65%. So the current average odds available on him at the moment are 1.90, which is minus 111. For an implied probability of 53%. So I definitely think there's still value on Glover. Obviously the returns are not going to be as good at these odds, but I still think he's a good bet at these odds, guys. I think he should be a much bigger favourite. Now I don't know how the odds are going to move from here on out. A lot of people think Cutelaba is good. A lot of people are hyping him up, and he absolutely could win. It's not going to take much to knock out Glover at this stage in his career. He's old, he's slow, his reflexes are shot, but even at these odds, he's a very good bet. Check out part 1 of this series of videos to find out why. And I also want to say a big thank you to everyone that hit the like button on part 1 of this video. I think that it's the most likes I've ever had on a video, and I can't thank you enough, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm trying hard to get to 1,000 subs before this event starts on Saturday, and by you hitting the like button, it really helps, because it helps basically get my video in front of more people on YouTube. The more likes that a video gets, the more that YouTube's basically going to show your videos to people that haven't subscribed yet. So I really appreciate the love, guys. If you could hit the like button on this one too, I would really appreciate it. But now enough of the talk, enough of going over old ground, enough of the promotional shit. It's time to get into the stuff that you are here for, and that is talking about fights. Let me clear my throat. Let me clear my throat. Right, first fight we are going to talk about in today's video is Augusto Sakai against Andre the Pitbull Arlovski. So they say that Father Time waits for no man, and it is fair to say that at 40 years old, Father Time has been knocking on Andre Arlovski's door for quite a while now. He hasn't looked good in his last 2 fights against Walt Harris and Shamil Abdurakhimov at all, and Arlovski is starting to show all the signs of a fighter on a very steep decline. We know on average when a male athlete reaches the age of 33, their body starts to produce significantly lower levels of testosterone, and then past the age of 33, they start to rapidly decline. Now, of course, there will be outliers out there like Daniel Cormier, but as a general rule, the further you get away from being 33 years old, the worse you get as an athlete and as a fighter. That goes for all sports. Well, all sports which require, physical output. I'm not sure about snooker and darts and shit like that. So he has looked poor in his last 4 fights. He's not particularly dangerous standing anymore. Doesn't really commit that hard to his strikes. Not particularly fast. Doesn't appear to really hit that hard anymore because he doesn't fully commit to his shots like he used to. He's also very gun shy, very hesitant, and he really struggles to let his hands go. This is something that we see happen to a lot of fighters as they get older. Over the last few years, some high-profile examples of this were Anderson Silva and Vitor Belfort, and also Lyoto Machida. You saw when they were in their prime, how they were ruthless at punishing their opponents for every little mistake they make. Whereas when they get older, you see them making the reads, you go see them wanting to let their hands go, but they just can't pull the trigger, and we're starting to see that in Arlovski now. He's also got pretty bad takedown defense, which is a real shame because Arlovski was a guy throughout his career very difficult to take down. Even though he's from Belarus, he did have a Sambo background, and as we know, Sambo guy is very difficult to take down, very difficult to hold down, but Arlovski's actually easy to put on his back now, and he's very weak off his back. Doesn't really do much to work his way back to his feet, not particularly effective on the ground at all. So there's no doubt about it in my mind that Arlovski is on a very steep decline. And to be honest with you, when Augusto Sakai was fighting in Bellator, I wasn't that impressed with him, to be honest with you. He was one of these guys that, again, really didn't put his stamp on rounds. Was quite passive, was quite tentative, didn't go up a gear, just was very one-paced and didn't really have that higher output, didn't really throw that many strikes per round, and that's why you see here 2 of his fights in Bellator, losing a split decision to Sheikh Congo and drawing against Dan Charles. That pretty much sums up what type of style he had. He never really put his stamp on rounds. But in his last 2 fights in the UFC, or at least one in the UFC and one on Dana White's Contender Series, he's looked much more aggressive. And at 27 years old, we could perhaps be seeing a sign of a fighter who understands they made some mistakes in Bellator. And since then, the fight against Sheikh Congo took place almost 2 years ago now. Since then, he's learned from his mistakes. He's maybe improved his cardio. He's a little bit more aggressive, throws a much higher volume of strikes now. And I actually like what I'm seeing from Augusto Sakai. He looked decent in his fight against Chase Sherman, and also with that being his official UFC debut, not taking into account his performance on the Contender Series, you would expect Sakai to perform a lot better in his second fight in the UFC, because remember, octagon jitters are a very real thing. And what's interesting about the fight against Chase Sherman is Sakai didn't really look that good in round 1 at all, but he picked it up in the second and third round, which suggests that he just started a bit slow. Octagon jitters, need to get comfortable, and I'm expecting a lot more from him in this second fight. So I do definitely think Augusto Sakai is going to win this. I do definitely favour him. So if we take a look at the odds here, just to give you the reasons why I favour him, I think that he's got a very heavy top game, can inflict a lot of damage from top position. He very rarely goes for takedowns. He's predominantly a striker, but if the opportunity to get into top position presents itself, he will take it. So for example, if Arlovski was to slip or get knocked down, or if Arlovski was trying to take Sakai down with a high risk throw or something, perhaps Sakai could reverse position and wind up on top. So Sakai is very serviceable on the ground, very skilled, very heavy top game. But standing, I just think that Sakai, even though there's not a massive difference between these two in terms of technique, Sakai at this stage in their careers definitely throws more volume of strikes per round, definitely is more aggressive, and at this stage in Arlovski's career, that is quite a significant thing, to be honest with you. That is quite significant. So looking at this fight from a betting point of view, we can see that Sakai's odds have declined quite a bit in the last 48 hours, down from around about, he was around, the odds charts here are actually a little bit out, guys. They're actually a little bit inaccurate, and I'm not sure why. But on Monday, Sakai was around about 1.74. They're only showing it as 1.71 here. But now he's down to around about 1.67 on most sites. We could call it an average of 1.70, I guess. So 1.70 gives us American moneyline odds of minus 143, giving Sakai an implied probability of 59%. And Andrei Arlovski, current average odds are around about 2.30, give him an implied probability of plus 130. So the money line odds of plus 130 for an implied probability of 43%. So this is pretty much a 60-40 fight where the bookies are capping the fight 60 40 in favour of Sakai. And this is really where the professional bit of being a professional gambler comes in. Because I really, really, really want to bet Augusto Sakai this weekend. Because I think he's going to win, basically. I really do think he's going to win. But in order to be able to bet Sakai, you have to give him better than a 60% chance of winning. So you have to give him, somewhere between 65 and 70% chance of winning this fight. And, I mean, can you do that? Like, hand on heart, can you get to that number? This is where being a professional gambler comes into it, because I really want to bet Sakai. I think he's going to win. The odds are pretty decent. But in order to make long-term money long-term in this game, you really have to be disciplined and pick your spots. And you really have to make sure you're getting a good deal whenever you place a bet. And I'm not sure if this is a good deal. I definitely give Sakai at least a 60% chance of winning this fight. Absolutely no doubt about it. But can I give him more than that? I'm not sure. And if the answer is that I'm not sure if I can give him more than a 60% chance of winning, probably the correct answer is that he doesn't have a better than 60% chance of winning. Therefore, at these odds, the smart thing is probably to pass, which is really frustrating because I think he's going to win. I mean, there's absolutely no way that I would bet Andrei Arlovski. I think he's definitely on a steep decline. Hasn't looked good in his last two fights against Walt Harris and Shamil Abdurakhimov. There's no way I would bet Arlovski here because I see him as a fighter on a steep decline, whereas I see Sakai as a young, hungry, up-and-coming fighter at 27 years old, making big improvements from fight to fight. But I don't know if I can bet Sakai at these odds, guys. In fact, I do know I can't bet Sakai at these odds. I need more value. I need to get a better deal for my money. So the way I'm going to play this is I am very interested in betting Augusto Sakai. I'm just scanning the odds here. So at the moment, Sakai's odds are around about 1.70. If his odds improve to 1.80, which would be minus 125 for the Americans, that would give Sakai an implied probability of 56%. Now, if his odds improve to 1.80, which they very well could, it's not a million miles away from where we are now at 1.70. And remember, Andrei Arlovski's a big name. A lot of casual bettors would not have heard of Augusto Sakai. He's only had one fight in the UFC, whereas they will have heard of Andrei Arlovski. We see a lot of late money coming in on fight day. We see a lot of line movement on fight day. It's very possible that, Sakai's odds could improve from 1.70 up to 1.80, which isn't a major difference. And at these odds, I would take Sakai. But I'm just going to have to wait and see how the odds move. At the current odds, I think it's a pass, a very, very reluctant pass, because I think he's going to win. But you have to be disciplined in this game to make money long term. You look at our bet on Glover. When I bet him, my odds are 2.50. That's a massive margin over the bookies. Odds of 2.50 plus 150 was an implied probability of 40%. And when I cap Glover at 60 to 65%, that's a 20 to 25% margin over the betting sites. Whereas if we were to bet Sakai now, there's just no margin there at all. Even if we bet him at 1.80, there's not a massive margin if we cap him at 60 to 65% chance of winning. So that's why it's a reluctant pass. But it's important to remember that if you only consistently put your money in strong positions over the long term, you'll make so much more money than if you put your money into marginal positions. Because when you put your money into marginal positions, you'll take so many more losses that will eat into your profits and eat into your ability to grow your money using compound interest. So that's why it is important to be disciplined. So the next fight that we are going to move on to here is Carla Esparza versus Vima Jandiroba. Now, Vima is stepping up to make her UFC debut on just 3 weeks' notice. She is the current Invicta strawweight champion, and she's pretty good, to be honest with you. Obviously, it's always a bit of a surprise when you see a UFC debutant open up as the favourite over an experienced UFC fighter, because we know that a massive percentage of fighters, when they make their debut, actually lose. So whenever you see a debutant open up as a favourite, you should think that they are pretty decent, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't like to take too much notice of win and loss records, but doesn't ever hurt to be undefeated. 14-0 is a pretty good record, and she's also got a decent number of fights in Invicta where it is a very competitive promotion. Now, this is an interesting fight because obviously with her being the favourite over an experienced fighter like Carla Esparza, you would anticipate that there's a good potential for Esparza to be a good bet at underdog odds. Here we can see at the moment Esparza is a slight underdog, although the odds are roughly around even. And we know that Esparza's no joke, so when I saw that Esparza was an underdog to a fighter making a UFC debut, she was a name that jumped out at me as a potential bet. But this is a tough fight to call, to be honest with you, because both girls are primarily grapplers. Obviously, Carla Esparza's got much more of a traditional wrestling style, very nice reactive double leg takedowns, and even though she's got quite a heavy top game, doesn't really do that much with top position, to be honest with you. She doesn't really inflict that much damage from top position, doesn't really threaten that many submissions, whereas Vima is completely different. She is also a grappler, but she is way more offensive on the ground. She's got a nice heavy top game, good technical Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, threatens with some nice submissions, attacks on the ground with a decent amount of ground and pound, and that's quite significant here because, as we know, under the new scoring that came into effect in January 2016, you no longer have to be in top position, be winning a grappling exchange. Even if Esparza was to get into top position, it's very possible that Vima could win the fight on the ground because Vima's constantly attacking on the ground, whereas Esparza really just looks to lay and pray. And don't forget that this new scoring was brought into effect to punish lay and pray tactics. So with Esparza not really achieving that much from top position, this is a very interesting fight. Now, both these girls are primarily grapplers. I expect them to want to take this fight to the ground as soon as possible, so I don't expect too much of this fight to take place standing, but if it does, I do give Vima a slight advantage. I mean, it's difficult to kind of break this fight down from a striking point of view because both girls are very different strikers. Vima is more of a traditional kickboxer, whereas Carla has a blitzing style where she likes to be all the way out of her opponent's range where her opponent can't hit her, or all the way in blitzing them with like 3-4 punch combos. And the reason why Carla uses that blitzing style is because it enables her to set her takedown attempts up. So what you will basically see is when Carla's all the way outside of her opponent's range, she'll stand in the same range that she will use to blitz her opponent and also to threaten for a takedown. So when she does blitz in, her opponents don't really know whether she's going to duck under and change levels and go for a takedown, or if she's going to basically land one of her blitzing combinations. So that's why she fights with that striker style. But I do expect this fight to go to the ground, and on the ground I do give Jandiroba the advantage just because she's more offensive, does have a heavy top game, but at the same time, from a betting point of view, it's very difficult to bet her as a favourite because we know octagon jitters are a very real thing, and we know a massive percentage of fighters that make their UFC debut actually lose. So if we look at this fight by the odds on Jandiroba are currently around about an average of 1.83, which is minus 120 for an implied probability of 55%. And I definitely wouldn't bet Jandiroba here just because Carla Esparza is reasonably skilled everywhere. This is a UFC debut. This is a big fight for Jandiroba. She's taking the fight on just 3 weeks' notice. I don't feel comfortable betting her as the favourite here. But at the same time, I'm not rushing out to bet Esparza either because I do give Jandiroba a slight advantage everywhere. I think this could be a very close fight, a back and forth fight, could end by split decision, and it's an easy pass for me, guys. I would recommend passing on this fight, although Jandiroba definitely has an advantage everywhere, and I think I've covered everything. So let's move on to the next fight, which is going to be Platinum Mike Perry against Alex Cowboy Oliveira. And this fight is a very good example of why conducting research is so important, and why studying footage of fighters before you bet on them is very, very important. And it's also a good example of why I hate giving out my thoughts on fights before I research them. A lot of the time, people want to ask me how I feel fights will play out that are not taking place for weeks. People asking me how Marlon Moraes against Henry Cejudo will play out, or Luke Rockhold against whoever the fuck Luke Rockhold's fighting next. I don't even know. And it's really hard for me to give out predictions because I know that my opinion as it stands today in a cold light of day working from hazy memories will be completely different to my opinions after I've watched a load of tape on both guys and done proper research. And this fight is a really good example of that, because if you would have asked me how I thought this fight would play out last week before I'd done any research at all, I would have told you that this was a very easy fight for Alex Oliveira, that he would dominate Perry and that it would be an easy win for him. But after doing research and actually watching footage from both guys, I'm not so sure at all. I actually think that Platinum Mike Perry is definitely a live underdog, to be honest with you, which is completely different to what I would have told you last week. So that's why it's always important to do research, because your mind will play tricks on you. It's very selective in what it remembers. So if you've watched, Perry's fights and Alex Oliveira's fights in the past, you can't control really what your brain is going to help you and let you recall about those fights. It's not until you sit down in the cold light of day and watch fights again you actually see what is true and how these past matchups unfolded. So, where do I start with this one? This is one of those fights where Alex Oliveira is a guy that can win this fight easily. Make no mistake about it. He's a very strong grappler. He's got a very long 77-inch reach, which enables him to get his arms all the way around his opponent's torso and control their body, or all the way around their legs when he's working for a takedown, connect his hands together and get those takedowns. As we know, Mike Perry doesn't have the best takedown defense, and he is at a very low level on the ground. Alex Oliveira's got a heavy top game, much higher level grappler. If Alex Oliveira comes out and spams takedowns for 15 minutes, this is going to be a very long night for Perry, and it should be a very easy fight for Oliveira. I mean, Perry, to be honest with you, is quite difficult to hold down. He's very good at exploding back to his feet. Remember, I always use the example of when you take a fighter down, you want them to use the Team Alpha Male style of takedown defense, where you'll never see a Team Alpha Male guy allow you to flatten their back on the canvas. As soon as their butt hits the ground, they treat the ground like lava and they immediately pop back to their feet. What you'll see from other guys is they will let their opponent flatten them out and establish a dominant position on the ground. Something that Mike Perry does very, very well is he goes the Team Alpha Male style of defense, where he immediately pops back to his feet, which is very, very good. Having said that, he is at a low level on the ground, and Alex Oliveira is such a strong wrestler that I do think Oliveira can win the fight easily if he comes out with a grappling heavy game plan. But fighters are unique. Fighters have their own quirks and personalities and egos, and they don't always take the path of least resistance. I mean, the fight between Glover and Ion Cutelaba is a good example of this, where I've spoken in depth about that fight in part 1 of these videos, and Glover is a fighter that knows that he's on a steep decline. He knows that he can't take a shot like he used to. He knows he's not as fast as he used to be. So he has swallowed his pride, and he's accepted those weaknesses. He's accepted his truth and reality. And he has now adjusted his fighting style to be primarily a grappler, to not stand in boxing range and mix it up and get sucked into a brawl. We now see Glover relentlessly shoot takedowns on his opponent for 15 minutes. I'm like 90% sure, 90% that we're going to see Glover come out and spam takedowns on Cutelaba. If I wasn't 90% sure he was going to do that, I wouldn't be betting him in this fight. But I'm not confident Alex Oliveira will do that, because for whatever reason, even in matchups where he has a striking advantage over a grappling advantage over his opponent, he at times does choose to get sucked into a wild brawl or try to beat them in a kickboxing match, and that could get him into a lot of trouble against Mike Perry, because Mike Perry is very heavy-handed and very, very dangerous. So if we look at this fight from a betting point of view, the current available odds on Alex Oliveira are around about 1.57, which is minus 175 for an implied probability of 64%. Now, there's no way that I would bet Oliveira as a favourite, just because he's just not the smartest fighter, to be honest with you. If I could trust him to come out and spam takedowns hard for 15 minutes and drive Perry into the cage and not try and strike with him and just basically try and wet blanket him for 3 rounds. I would absolutely bet Oliveira at these odds because he's tough, he's got decent cardio, and I feel like he could grind Perry out quite easily. But I can't trust him to do that, so I've got to pass. He, for whatever reason, just chooses to get into wild brawls sometimes. Like the matchup against Yancy Medeiros. The fight against Medeiros could have been much easier if he would have fought smarter and go to his grappling, and he didn't. But the odds on Mike Perry are currently around about an average of 2.55, which is plus 155 for an implied probability of 39%. So again, this matchup's close to a 60-40 fight in favour of Oliveira. And to be honest with you, this is one of those fights where I think the bookies have got the odds spot on. And that's okay, guys. Remember, more often than not, they will get the odds right. You have to remember that the betting sites are multinational, billion-dollar companies that make a living from basically forcing people into making bad betting decisions. And a mistake that a lot of people make is that they often assume that there is value in the underdogs if they believe that an underdog has a chance of winning, and that is not true, because as we can see in the odds on Mike Perry, that he is a decent sized underdog at 2.55, but that implied probability is only 39%. So do you give Perry a 50-50 chance in this fight? Because that's what you should be looking at in order to get any value here. In my opinion, these odds are pretty accurate. I do give Perry a chance of winning this fight, but not better than a 40% chance of winning this fight. Certainly not a 50% chance of winning this fight. Because if Oliveira comes out with a grappling heavy game plan and wet blankets Perry for 3 rounds, Perry's absolutely screwed, and there's not much Perry can do to stop him. This fight really comes down to what game plan Oliveira comes into with. How disciplined is he? How smart does he fight? This is Oliveira's fight to lose, and while Perry is definitely a live dog, that doesn't automatically mean there's value on him. At these odds, I don't believe there is value. The bookies are spot on, so it's an easy pass for me. So sorry to be boring in today's video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. I also hope that the odds on Augusto Sakai improve. So, if you feel like sharing this video around on forums for me, I would also really appreciate it to help get more subscribers, help get the likes up. But also, if you don't for this video, that would be kind of cool, because I'm kind of hoping that the morons on the Sherdog forums will bet Arlovski and improve the price on Sakai for us. So feel free not to share this video. But anyway, I hope you have a great day. I hope you are enjoying these videos, and I'll be back hopefully tomorrow breaking down another 3 fights. So take care and good night.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love, and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking.